The morning air felt heavy at Kensington Palace as Catherine stood by the large windows overlooking the gardens. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the official documents that would change everything. The medical reports were clear and there was no turning back from what lay ahead. William had been called away to an emergency Commonwealth meeting, unaware of what his wife had discovered just hours earlier. The palace staff moved quietly through the halls, sensing something different in the atmosphere. Catherine's usual warm greetings to the housekeepers and gardeners had been replaced by distant nods and forced smiles. She had always been the one to bring light into the ancient walls of the palace, but today that light seemed dimmed. Dr. Harrison had been gentle when delivering the news, but his words cut through Catherine like ice. The condition was rare, progressive, and would require immediate attention. More importantly, it would mean stepping away from royal duties, away from the life she had built alongside William, away from the future they had planned together. The children were at school, blissfully unaware that their mother's world was crashing down around her. Catherine had insisted on maintaining their normal routine, knowing that soon everything would change for them too. She walked through their rooms, touching small items that held precious memories. George's football boots still muddy from yesterday's practice, Charlotte's art supplies scattered across her desk, and Louis's favorite stuffed animal waiting patiently on his bed. As Catherine sat in the drawing room where she and William had shared countless quiet evenings, she rehearsed the words she would need to say. How do you tell the person you love most that your time together might be limited? How do you prepare for a goodbye that neither of you saw coming? The weight of the crown had always been heavy, but this burden felt impossible to bear. The sound of cars approaching the palace gates made her heart race. William was returning early from his meeting, and she knew she couldn't delay this conversation any longer. Catherine wiped away the tears that had been threatening to fall all morning and walked toward the entrance hall. In a few moments, she would have to be stronger than she had ever been before. The palace doors opened, and William's familiar footsteps echoed through the marble corridors. Catherine took a deep breath, knowing that once she spoke the words aloud, there would be no pretending that everything was fine. The life they had built together, the plans they had made, the dreams they had shared, everything was about to change forever. William appeared in the doorway with his usual warm smile, but it faded immediately when he saw Catherine's face. In that moment, without a single word being spoken, he knew that something terrible had happened. The color drained from his features as he dropped his briefcase and moved toward his wife. Catherine tried to speak, but no words came. She simply held up the medical documents with shaking hands, watching as William's world began to crumble just as hers had hours before. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of London traffic and the ticking of the grandfather clock that had witnessed generations of royal sorrows. As William took the papers from her trembling fingers, Catherine finally found her voice. The conversation that followed would be one of the most difficult of their lives, setting in motion events that would not only change their family forever, but would also send shockwaves throughout the Commonwealth and beyond. The fairy tale that the world had watched unfold was about to face its greatest test. William's hand shook as he read through the medical documents, his eyes scanning the same lines over and over again as if hoping the words would somehow change. The diagnosis was written in clinical terms that felt cold and impersonal, but the implications were devastating. Catherine watched her husband's face transform from confusion to understanding, then to the same overwhelming grief she had felt that morning. The medical team at the private hospital had been thorough in their assessment. The condition affecting Catherine was not only serious but required immediate and intensive treatment. The doctors had been clear about the timeline. She would need to begin treatment within weeks, and the process would be long and uncertain. More heartbreaking was the possibility that the treatment might not be enough. William set the papers aside and pulled Catherine into his arms without saying a word. They stood together in the quiet drawing room, holding each other as the reality of their situation settled around them like a heavy blanket. For the first time since their wedding day, they both felt truly helpless against forces beyond their control. The immediate concern was how to handle this crisis while protecting their family and fulfilling their responsibilities to the nation. William knew that every decision they made from this point forward would be scrutinized by the media and the public, yet all he could think about was Catherine, and how unfair it seemed that someone so full of life and compassion should face such a challenge. Catherine was the first to pull back from their embrace. wiping tears from both their faces. She had spent the morning thinking about practical matters, and now it was time to share those thoughts with William. The children would need to be told, but in a way that wouldn't frighten them unnecessarily. The royal household would need to be informed, and arrangements would have to be made for her upcoming engagements. Most importantly, they needed to decide when and how to inform the public. The palace communications team would need time to prepare statements, and there would be countless meetings with advisors and medical professionals. But before any of that could happen, Catherine wanted one last normal evening with her family. William listened as Catherine outlined her thoughts, marveling at her strength and clarity even in the face of such devastating news. She had always been the steady presence in their family, the one who brought balance to the chaos of royal life. Now, when she needed support the most, she was still thinking of others before herself. As the afternoon wore on, they made the difficult decision to keep the news private for a few more days. Catherine wanted to personally cancel her upcoming engagements, rather than having staff members make excuses on her behalf. She felt she owed that courtesy to the charities and organizations she worked with, many of which had become deeply important to her over the years. The hardest conversation would be with the Queen. Catherine had always felt a special bond with William's grandmother, and she knew how difficult this news would be for the elderly monarch to hear. The Queen had already faced so much loss and uncertainty in recent years, and Catherine hated the thought of adding to her worries. That evening, as they sat down for dinner with their children, Catherine and William put on brave faces and engaged in normal family conversation. George talked excitedly about his upcoming school project. Charlotte showed off a drawing she had made of their family, and Louis regaled them with stories from his day at nursery school. Neither parent had the heart to dampen their children's spirits with the knowledge of what lay ahead. After the children were in bed, Catherine and William returned to the drawing room where their world had changed that morning. They spent hours talking about memories they had made together, dreams they had shared, and hopes they still held for the future. Despite the uncertainty that lay ahead, they found comfort in their love for each other and their determination to face whatever came next together. As midnight approached, they made a pact to take each day as it came, to cherish the time they had, and to fight with everything they had for more time together. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations and impossible decisions, but tonight they simply held each other and tried to find peace in the midst of the storm. The next morning brought a whirlwind of activity, as Catherine and William began the difficult process of informing their inner circle. The first call was to Catherine's parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, who drove immediately to Kensington Palace upon hearing the news. Carol's composure cracked the moment she saw her daughter, and the two women held each other tightly as Michael and William discussed the medical details in hushed tones. The Queen was informed during her morning briefing, and despite her advanced age and years of maintaining royal composure, she requested an immediate private audience with Catherine and William. When they arrived at Buckingham Palace that afternoon, they found the monarch waiting in her private sitting room, her usual formal demeanor replaced by the warm concern of a loving grandmother. Catherine had always admired the Queen's strength and grace under pressure, but seeing the elderly woman's eyes fill with tears upon hearing the diagnosis was almost unbearable. The Queen took Catherine's hands in her own and spoke words of encouragement that came from decades of facing adversity with dignity. She assured Catherine that the entire royal family would support her through whatever lay ahead, and that her legacy of service would never be forgotten. The conversation with King Charles was equally emotional. Catherine had developed a close relationship with her father-in-law over the years, and he had come to rely on her steady presence and wise counsel. Charles immediately offered access to the best medical specialists in the world and suggested that Catherine and William take extended leave from royal duties to focus entirely on her health and their family. The most heartbreaking conversation was yet to come, telling the children. Catherine and William had consulted with child psychologists about the best approach, but nothing could have prepared them for the actual moment. They chose to speak with each child individually, tailoring their explanations to each age and personality. George, being the eldest at 10 years old, understood more than his parents wished he would. His immediate concern was whether his mother was going to die, a question that Catherine answered with as much honesty as she could manage while still providing hope. She explained that the doctors had caught the condition early, and that she would be receiving the best possible treatment. Charlotte, at 8 years old, was more focused on the practical implications. Would Mummy still be able to attend her school play? Could they still go on their planned family holiday? Catherine assured her daughter that while some things might need to change, their love and commitment to being a family would never waver. 5-year-old Louis had the most difficult time understanding what was happening. He knew something was wrong because both his parents seemed sad, but the concept of serious illness was beyond his comprehension. Catherine and William decided to keep the explanations simple and focus on reassuring him that he would always be loved and cared for. The palace staff were informed through carefully planned meetings with key department heads. Many of these individuals had worked closely with Catherine for years and considered her more than just their employer. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Thompson, who had been with the royal household for over 30 years, broke down completely upon hearing the news. Catherine spent considerable time that day comforting the very people who were supposed to be supporting her. As word spread through the palace, an atmosphere of quiet determination settled over everyone involved. The staff members who had witnessed Catherine's kindness, work ethic, and genuine care for others over the years were now united in their desire to support her through this crisis. Plans were quietly put in place to manage her care while maintaining the secrecy that the family desperately needed during this initial period. The medical team assembled by the palace doctors was impressive in their credentials and experience. Catherine would be treated by some of the world's leading specialists in her condition, and every possible resource would be made available to her. However, the doctors were careful to manage expectations while remaining hopeful about her prognosis. That evening, Catherine sat in her private study writing personal letters to the heads of the various charities and organizations she patronized. Each letter was handwritten and explained that she would need to step back from her duties temporarily due to health concerns. She wanted these organizations to hear the news directly from her before any public announcements were made. William found her there past midnight, surrounded by dozens of letters, tears staining the pages as she wrote. The sight of his wife taking such care to personally inform everyone who mattered to her, even while facing her own crisis, reminded him once again why he had fallen in love with her all those years ago at university. As they prepared for bed that night, both Catherine and William knew that tomorrow would bring even more difficult conversations. The Prime Minister would need to be informed, along with other Commonwealth leaders. The palace communications team would begin preparing for the public announcement that would inevitably come. But for now they found solace in the quiet moments together, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they would face it with the same grace and dignity that had defined their partnership from the very beginning. 3 days later, the inevitable moment arrived when Catherine and William knew they could no longer keep the news private. Rumors were beginning to circulate after several scheduled engagements had been quietly canceled, and the palace communications team warned that speculation in the media was becoming increasingly intense. The decision was made to release an official statement the following morning. Catherine spent her final evening before the public announcement, walking through the palace gardens where she had found so much peace over the years. The roses were in full bloom, and she stopped to smell each variety, trying to memorize the fragrance that had always brought her comfort. William walked silently beside her, both of them knowing that after tomorrow, their lives would never be the same. The statement, carefully crafted by the communications team in consultation with Catherine and William, was released at precisely 9 o'clock in the morning. Within minutes, the news had spread around the globe, and the palace phone lines were overwhelmed with calls from world leaders, fellow royals, and members of the public expressing their support and concern. The reaction from the British public was immediate and overwhelming. Flowers began appearing at the gates of Kensington Palace within hours of the announcement, and soon there were mountains of bouquets, cards, and small gifts from well-wishers. Many people shared their own experiences with similar conditions, offering hope and encouragement to Catherine and her family. International reaction was equally supportive. Leaders from across the Commonwealth issued statements of support, and even political figures who had been critical of the monarchy in the past expressed their sympathy and admiration for Catherine's courage in facing this challenge publicly. The outpouring of love and support from around the world was both comforting and overwhelming for the family. The media coverage was intense but generally respectful, with most major outlets focusing on Catherine's years of dedicated service, rather than speculating about her prognosis. Several newspapers ran special editions highlighting her charitable work and the positive impact she had made on countless lives. The coverage reminded everyone of just how beloved Catherine had become during her time as a member of the royal family. Behind the scenes at the palace, preparations were underway for Catherine's treatment schedule. A private medical facility had been arranged where she could receive care away from public scrutiny, and security arrangements were being coordinated to ensure her privacy during this vulnerable time. The logistics were complex, but everyone involved was determined to provide Catherine with the best possible environment for healing. The children's school was privately informed of the situation to ensure they would receive appropriate support during this difficult time. Teachers and staff were briefed on how to handle any questions or comments from other students, and counseling services were made available if needed. The school community rallied around the family, offering practical support and maintaining the normalcy that Catherine and William desperately wanted for their children. As the days passed, Catherine began her treatment regimen while trying to maintain as much normalcy as possible at home. The medical team was cautiously optimistic about her response to the initial treatments, but everyone understood that the road ahead would be long and uncertain. William had cleared his schedule to be present for every medical appointment and to provide hands-on support with the children. The extended royal family proved to be an invaluable source of strength during this time. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense approach and incredible work ethic, quietly took on several of Catherine's patronages to ensure continuity of support for important causes. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh increased their public engagements to help fill the gap left by Catherine's absence. Perhaps most touching was the response from the charities and organizations that Catherine had worked with over the years. Many sent delegations to the palace with messages of support and assurances that they would be waiting for her return, however long that might take. The children's charities she had championed organized special events in her honor, with young beneficiaries creating artwork and writing letters to wish her well. Catherine found particular comfort in the letters from other women who had faced similar health challenges. These personal accounts of struggle and triumph provided her with hope and practical advice for the journey ahead. She began keeping these letters in a special box, reading them whenever she felt overwhelmed by the uncertainty of her situation. The palace established a special protocol for managing the thousands of get-well messages that arrived daily. A dedicated team was assigned to read every letter and card, ensuring that Catherine could personally review as many as possible. Many of these messages would later inspire her to develop new initiatives focused on supporting others facing similar health challenges. As Catherine settled into her treatment routine, she and William began to establish new family traditions that accommodated their changed circumstances. Quiet movie nights replaced formal dinner parties, and simple walks in the private palace gardens became precious family time. The children adapted remarkably well to the new routine, often surprising their parents with their resilience and maturity. 1 month after the public announcement, Catherine felt strong enough to record a brief video message thanking the public for their overwhelming support. Filmed in the familiar surroundings of Kensington Palace, she spoke with characteristic grace about her gratitude for the medical care she was receiving, and her determination to return to her royal duties when her health permitted. The message was viewed millions of times within hours of its release, providing reassurance to a concerned public, and demonstrating Catherine's enduring connection with the people she served. 6 months into Catherine's treatment, the medical team delivered news that nobody had dared to hope for. Her condition was responding better than expected to the therapy. While the doctors remained cautiously optimistic and stressed that continued treatment would be necessary, the progress was undeniable. For the first time since that devastating morning when everything changed, Catherine and William allowed themselves to believe that their story might have a happier ending than they had feared. The improvement in Catherine's health coincided with a remarkable transformation in how the royal family approached their public duties. The crisis had brought them closer together and had given them a new perspective on what truly mattered. William had discovered a depth of strength he never knew he possessed, and the children had developed a maturity and empathy that impressed everyone who met them. Catherine's gradual return to limited public duties was carefully managed by the palace team. Her first official appearance was at a small charity event supporting cancer research, an organization that had become particularly meaningful to her during her treatment. The sight of Catherine walking into the venue, visibly thinner but with her characteristic warm smile intact, brought tears to the eyes of everyone present. The media coverage of her return was handled with unprecedented cooperation between the palace and major news outlets. Agreements were reached to respect Catherine's privacy, while still allowing the public to see that she was recovering well. Photographs from her charity appearance showed a woman who had been tested by adversity, but had emerged with an even greater sense of purpose. As Catherine slowly increased her public engagements, she began incorporating her personal experience into her charitable work. She visited cancer treatment centers, met with other patients and their families, and became a powerful advocate for improved support services for people facing serious health challenges. Her authenticity and genuine empathy made her more effective in this role than she had ever been before. The relationship between Catherine and William had also evolved during this difficult period. The crisis had stripped away many of the formal aspects of their royal life and had reminded them of their fundamental partnership as husband and wife and as parents. They had learned to communicate about difficult topics with a new level of honesty and had developed a deeper appreciation for the time they had together. The children had also been transformed by the experience. George, who had initially struggled with anxiety about his mother's condition, had become protective of his family and more aware of the responsibilities that would one day be his. Charlotte had developed a particular interest in medical charities and often asked to accompany her mother to hospital visits. Louis, though still young, had learned the importance of quiet time and family togetherness. A year after the initial diagnosis, Catherine and William made the decision to share more details about their experience in a documentary designed to help other families facing similar challenges. The filming took place over several months and showed intimate moments of their family life, including honest discussions about fear, hope, and the importance of support systems during health crises. The documentary, when it aired, became one of the most watched programs in British television history. Viewers were moved by the family's honesty about their struggles and inspired by their determination to use their experience to help others. The program sparked important conversations about health, family, and resilience, and led to increased funding for research and support services. One of the most powerful moments in the documentary came when Catherine spoke directly to other women facing similar diagnoses. She shared practical advice about managing treatment side effects, the importance of maintaining hope, and the value of accepting help from others. Her words were later printed as a pamphlet that was distributed to cancer treatment centers around the world. The anniversary of Catherine's diagnosis was marked privately by the family, with a quiet celebration of how far they had come. They planted a new tree in the palace gardens, choosing a variety known for its resilience and ability to thrive in challenging conditions. The tree would serve as a permanent reminder of their journey and their commitment to growing stronger together. As Catherine's health continued to improve and stabilize, plans were made for a gradual return to a fuller schedule of royal duties. However, the experience had changed her priorities, and she was selective about which engagements to accept. She focused primarily on health-related charities and organizations that supported families facing medical crises. The palace announced that Catherine would be launching a new initiative focused on improving support services for families dealing with serious illness. The program would bring together medical professionals, social workers, and other families who had faced similar challenges to develop better resources and support networks. Catherine would use her platform and her personal experience to advocate for changes in how society supports people during health crises. 2 years after that dark morning when their world seemed to be ending, Catherine and William found themselves in a position they had never expected, stronger as individuals, as a couple, and as a family than they had ever been before. The experience had tested them in ways they could never have imagined, but it had also revealed reserves of strength and love that they had not known existed. The public's perception of the royal family had also evolved during this time. People had seen them face genuine adversity with grace and courage, and had witnessed their commitment to using their experience to help others. The fairy tale image had been replaced by something more real and more powerful. The story of a family that had faced its greatest challenge and had emerged with an even greater capacity to serve others. 5 years after the diagnosis that changed everything, Catherine stood once again in the drawing room where her world had nearly collapsed. But this time she was not alone with devastating news. Instead, she was surrounded by medical professionals, charity workers, and families who had been helped by the foundation she had established during her recovery. They were celebrating the 5th anniversary of an organization that had grown from personal crisis into a global movement supporting families facing serious illness. The foundation had achieved remarkable success in its short existence. Treatment centers around the world now incorporated support programs based on Catherine's initiatives. Thousands of families had received assistance during their darkest hours, and medical research had been advanced through funding provided by the organization. What had begun as personal tragedy had been transformed into a legacy of hope and healing. Catherine's own health had stabilized completely, though she continued regular monitoring and had learned to live with the understanding that life could change without warning. Rather than living in fear of the future, she had embraced each day with gratitude and purpose. Her approach to royal duties had been permanently changed by her experience, and she was now known for bringing unusual depth and authenticity to her charitable work. The documentary about their family's journey had won numerous awards and had been translated into dozens of languages. It continued to be used in medical schools and support centers as a tool for helping healthcare professionals understand the emotional impact of serious diagnosis on families. Catherine often received letters from young doctors and nurses who said the film had changed how they approached patient care. William had also been transformed by the experience in unexpected ways. He had discovered talents for patient advocacy and healthcare policy that nobody, including himself, had known existed. He now served on the boards of several medical research organizations and had become a respected voice in discussions about improving support for families facing health crises. His marriage to Catherine had deepened in ways that made their early relationship seem almost superficial by comparison. The children, now teenagers and a preteen, had grown up with an unusual awareness of life's fragility and preciousness. George had decided to pursue medical studies, inspired by the doctors who had helped his mother and the patients his family had met over the years. Charlotte had become an accomplished artist who used her talents to create artwork for children's hospitals. Louis had developed into an exceptionally empathetic child, who seemed to have an intuitive understanding of when others needed comfort. On this anniversary evening, as the celebration wound down and guests departed, Catherine and William found themselves alone in the same room where their crisis had begun. The contrast between that dark morning and this evening of celebration was not lost on either of them. They had learned that the end of one story could be the beginning of another, and that sometimes the most devastating experiences could lead to the most meaningful outcomes. Catherine reflected on the thousands of letters she had received over the years from other families who had faced similar challenges. Many wrote to thank her for showing them that it was possible to find strength in vulnerability and purpose in pain. Others shared their own stories of triumph over adversity, creating a network of support that extended far beyond anything the royal family could have imagined. The media's relationship with the family had also evolved significantly. The respectful coverage during Catherine's illness had established new protocols for reporting on royal health matters, and journalists had gained a deeper appreciation for the human beings behind the titles. The family's openness about their struggles had created a more authentic connection with the public than years of formal engagements had ever achieved. As they prepared to leave the drawing room that held so many memories, both painful and joyful, Catherine and William paused to look at a photograph that had been taken earlier that evening. It showed Catherine surrounded by children from the hospital she visited regularly, all of them wearing bright smiles despite their own health challenges. The image captured everything their journey had taught them about the power of hope, community, and love. Walking through the palace corridors toward their private quarters, they passed portraits of previous generations of royals who had faced their own trials and tribulations. Catherine realized that she had joined a long tradition of individuals who had used their positions to serve others during difficult times. Her particular contribution to that legacy would be her willingness to transform personal struggle into public service. The evening ended, as so many now did, with the family gathered together for quiet time before bed. The children shared stories from their day, Catherine and William discussed plans for upcoming charitable events, and they all simply enjoyed being together. These ordinary moments had become precious to them in ways that their more formal lifestyle had never allowed. As Catherine turned off the lights in the drawing room for the final time that evening, she thought about the letter she had written to herself on the first anniversary of her diagnosis. In it, she had promised to never forget the fear and uncertainty of those early days, but also to never stop believing in the possibility of better days ahead. Looking around at the evidence of all the good that had come from their darkest period, she felt that promise had been more than fulfilled. The tearful goodbye hug that the world had watched in silence 5 years earlier had not been an ending after all. Instead, it had been a transformation of a family, of their understanding of their role in the world, and of their capacity to turn personal pain into public purpose. The world had indeed watched, but what they had witnessed was not a tragedy. They had seen the beginning of one of the most powerful stories of resilience and service in modern royal history.